Say whatever you want about disco music, but it had some absolutely sick bass lines. Bass lines that still hold up decades later. Hi, I'm Luke from Become a Bassist, and in this lesson I'm going to show you 5 great disco bass lines from relatively easy to more challenging. And if you can get through all of them, you'll absolutely level up your plucking hand, maybe even get your bandmates, neighbors, partners, or even just your dog to have a bit of a dance as well. Welcome to Become a Bassist, where it is all about insanely practical, no BS bass lessons designed to get you playing better bass, having more fun, and becoming the best bassist you can be. And today is all about the disco bass lines. And I don't know about you, but I'm pretty keen to jump in. So our first disco bass line, super simple. You can almost think of this as being our warm-up bass line before we get, too intense into things. And it is Disco Inferno from the Tramps. Now, by the way, if you do want all the tabs and notation and tracks for all the bass lines in this video, just click the link in the description. You can get all of that for free. Now, this bass line has just 2 sections. Probably the more famous one is the verse section. I have included the second section, the chorus section, in the PDF though, so if you do want to learn the whole song, it's right there in the PDF. But let's just focus on that verse section. It's mostly a bunch of C's, G's, E flats, F's, and B flats. So our main idea: C, C, G, C, E flat, F, B flat, C. And then at the end of the phrase, we get our classic kind of first disco octaves, starting on our low A open string and the octave above, then B flat, first and third frets on the A and G strings, and then B to the C. Now, like I said, this one is relatively easy to start with. The one tricky thing here is that shift to the G. So you can get that G there. You could potentially play this all in one position, like that a bit, but it doesn't feel quite as nice as having the... So that's how I would play it. Like I said, you don't have to do that way though. If you find other way that works for you, that's totally fine. Alright, that's a pretty good warm-up, right? Definitely disco vibes, but more on the, on the easier side, especially for the right hand, the plucking hand. We didn't even get to many, disco octaves in that one. But that all changes with bassline number 2 we're going to go through. We're looking at ABBA's Gimme Gimme Gimme. That's the kind of chorus part. There's also a second part, that, there's that little flute hook thing. It sounds like this. 3, 4. Very cool bass line, and this is basically all octaves. So that's the 2 main sections of the song, the chorus and that hook there with the flutes that's been sampled millions and millions of times. Now, our chorus is just octave Ds, B flats, and Cs, all on the A string, A and G strings. So 5th and 7th fret for the D, 1st and 3rd for the B flat, 3rd and 5th for the C. So we get the D first, just octave Ds and then B flats, Ds, B flat, C, and then D again, then B flat, up to D, then C, and D. Now, it is all just 8th notes, apart from those little 16th notes in that second bar. We get this kind of rhythm here. When we get back to the D, we get 8th notes. Yeah, and then back down to the B flat there. Now, the hook section is all just 8th notes again on the A string, and again, using mostly Ds, but we get Fs as well up here, so 8th and 10th frets on the A and G strings, and then octave A flats on the 12th and 14th frets up there. Now, the only tricky thing with this is that it's not just those octaves. The first bar is just Ds, and and then we get D, E, 7th fret on the E string, and then the octave Fs. And then we get a G right before our first full bar of A's, and then back to the D's. Just like that. That's about the only tricky thing about this one, but if you listen to the flute melody hook thing, you'll know exactly when to change in that second bar. Alright, next we work the plucking hand even harder. We are totally going to start adding some more of those constant 16ths with our next bass line. It is an absolute banger, an absolute classic. It's the Village People's YMCA, or as I like to call it, Why Not MCA? Stupid joke, but it sounds like this. 2, 3, YMCA. Now, notice that our rhythm isn't just eighth notes anymore. We're getting a ton of 16ths and that classic disco octave thing. You know, eighth note, 2 16ths up high. That kind of thing there. Now, we're getting tons of octave G flats, 2nd and 4th frets on the E and D strings. We're getting E flats, 6th and 8th frets on the A and G strings. We're getting lots of A flats, 4th and 6th on the E and A strings. And finally, lots of D flats on the same frets but on the A and the G strings. Now, our basic pattern for this is low note, then 2 16ths on the octave, and then 8th note on the low note, 8th note on the high one. So we've got low, high, low, high, dun ga ga dun ga dun ga ga dun ga dun ga ga dun ga. Now, this is where things can get a little bit trickier. So if this is a bit of a struggle, I definitely recommend taking this pattern super slow, working the tempo up until you can get to the performance tempo. And by the way, I do have slower practice tracks available for free at the link in the description. But just take things super slow, and then slowly try and get faster. Until you can get up to that performance tempo, right? Just like I said, start super slow though, because you don't want to, go beyond your kind of capabilities and then have to, kind of tear everything down. Don't want that. So start slow, work that tempo up. Now, the only other thing to know about this bass line is that on every chord except the kind of D flat there, we get disco octaves right before them coming from 2 frets below. So on the G flat, before we go to the next chord, that E flat, we get this. Yeah, we get D flat, D natural, up to the E flat, just approaching it by 2 frets. Same thing for the A flat, we get G flat, G, A flat. It doesn't happen on the D flat chord, but going back to the top, we get this, E, F, up to that G flat right there. And that brings us to the top of the bass line. Now, at this point, it's probably helpful to start thinking about your technique specifically and how you're playing these lines with the right hand. Now, for me, the most comfortable, most effective thing is if I kind of pluck a bit further over my bridge pickup right here. I'll kind of anchor my thumb here, and rather than kind of being over here, I'll just move my fingers back a little bit. It gives me a little bit more resistance back here so I can dig in a little bit harder. And when I start doing these disco octaves, I also basically always follow the same plucking hand pattern when I'm doing these kind of cliche octave lines. I'll pluck the low note with my index finger, then the first high note with my middle finger, the second high note with my index, and then I'll jump over the middle string and come back to play the next low note with my index. Now, of course, that's what works for me. You may be the same, you may be different, but if this is where you get stuck, I'd highly recommend, like I said, taking things super slow, be super mindful of which fingers you're using, and be as intentional about it as you can. Now, so far, we've only played kind of classic, some might even say old bass lines, but the last two, they're a bit more modern and they sound freaking great. Our first modern disco bass line comes from a wicked artist named Tom Misch. Now, check out some of his stuff if you've never heard it before, but we'll be looking at his song called Disco Yes, and it sounds like this. 2, 3. listen to this song, it will get stuck in your mind in the best way possible. So we're starting with super hard short hits on our open A string, then our second fret, the B right there, and then a C on the third fret. Then we get this little idea. Yeah, we're getting, it's just a D and an E with a couple of muted notes either side. Now our second bar and our fourth bar of this phrase are exactly the same, and they both start with an offbeat high E. So we get up high E, and then we get this idea. E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, B. So on the E string, open, second, third fret, open on the A string, second, third, second fret, right there. Now, our third bar is definitely the most disco-y, with octave A's, open A string, and second fret on the G string, B's, second and fourth fret, C's, third and fifth fret, and D's on our fifth and seventh fret, all on our A and G strings. Now on these D's though, we get this. We get low D, high D, and then up to the E on the last 16th note of the bar, which leads perfectly into our last bar of the phrase, which, like I said, is the exact same as the second. Yeah, so all together, we get this. Yeah, such a cool bass line. Our final disco bass line comes from Joe Dart himself, playing the Wolfpack song Disco Ulysses, and this is probably the trickiest of all the bass lines, the pinnacle of our disco aerobics. Now again, we are going to be going through this reasonably quickly, so if you want to download the free tabs and notation so you can take it more at your own pace, just click the link in the description. You can get it all for free right there. Now, if you haven't heard Disco Ulysses, definitely check out the whole song. There's kind of two parts to this song, but the very disco-y part sounds like this. Yeah, this one is a super cool bass line and reasonably challenging, right? We're starting with octave E's, 7th and 9th frets on the A and G strings, classic disco octaves, then just 8th note G sharps, 4th and 6th frets on the E and D strings, and it's just kind of same rhythm as the YMCA. We're getting the low 8th note, high 16ths, and then 2 8th notes, but just with different notes this time. Just like that. Then we get B, E, 7th frets on the E and A string, and then we anticipate the last 8th note of the bar. So we get right there on the and of 4. Then we get high D sharps, 8th fret on the G string, and then down low we get a single F sharp on the E string, 2nd fret, and then the same kind of idea from our first bar, except with A sharp and D sharp. So 6th frets and on the E and the A strings, and then a quick chromatic thing from D sharp to D to C sharp on the A string, 5th, so 6th, 5th, and 4th frets, and that brings us to, again, anticipating that C sharp on the and of 4 and having octave C sharps in 16ths. Then we get octave E's on the open E string, open it in 2nd fret on the D string. Then we get this idea. So we're getting F sharp, G, then an almost ghosted note there, and then again anticipating the G sharp on the and of beat 4. 1, 2, 3, just like that. Now, our final bar is just classic disco vibes. We get G sharp octaves, A sharp octaves, B octaves, and then C sharp before we anticipate that D again. So we get 4th and 6th fret on the E string, 6th and 8th fret, 7th and 9th fret on the E string, all on those classic disco octave vibes, then D sharp on the A string, the 6th fret right there, before we anticipate once again the E on the and of 4, and then that phrase repeats again. So altogether it sounds like this. Just like that, yeah? Now there is also another section to this song which I've also included in the PDF download. This one is not only a workout for the plucking hand, but there's a ton of quick shifts to do in the fretting hand as well. Now, of course, the best way to get your hands around these kind of trickier bass lines is with practice, right? And to make that super easy, I've made the tabs, notation, and tracks available for free on becomeabassist.com, including some of the slower practice tracks, so you can kind of work them up to speed gradually. Now, it is all totally free, so if you want all the goodies, just click in the description or right here, fill out the form on that page, and you'll be sent everything in less than 60 seconds, and you can start this epic disco workout. So I will see you in there.